Bienvenidos al Festival RealMix 0.2 2022. Este festival es un evento virtual que tiene como objetivo reconocer y fomentar la creación y experimentación tecnológica a través de proyectos de realidad virtual, VR, realidad aumentada, AR, y realidades mixtas, MX, propiciando una serie de reflexiones en torno a la creación, uso y circulación de contenidos inmersivos, por medio de una programación que incluye intervenciones artísticas, conversatorios, talleres y conciertos, a cargo de destacados invitados y artistas colombianos e internacionales.
Hola, soy Asher Remy-Toledo. Yo soy el fundador y director de Hyphen Hub, una organización basada en Nueva York, y trabajamos con artistas y creadores que están trabajando en tecnologías emergentes. Ahora, bueno, voy a cambiar a inglés y ya empezamos. So, hello, I'm Asher Remy-Toledo. I'm the director of Hyphen Hub. I'm based in New York. I am a Colombian who's been living in New York for many years. And Hyphen Hub is an organization, is a global network of artists and creators working in emerging technologies. Today for this presentation, we have Jonah King and Sue Huang. There are two artists that are working in this field. They are based in New York now. Jonah is originally from Ireland. And Sue, where are you from? I read that you are from Saudi Arabia.
That's where I was born and I grew up.
You were, yeah. So
Yeah.
I was thinking, okay, so but you've been based in New York for a while.
For a few years, yeah. Now.
Yes, and you guys are both professors as well,
Yes.
here in New York. So so it's very both of us. One of the things that we have in common is that we are both part of the incubator in New York called the New Inc., which is an incubator that started out of the New Museum in New York, and I was a resident there, and then I became a mentor. And Sue and Juan, Sue and Jonah, they are both residents there as well. So I got to meet them on one of the presentations where they showcased the residents of the New Inc. And I found their work very interesting. First, they both have been working with nature, with ecologies, and how, but it's not only that, but the deeper way of connecting with our humanness. And I found it very, compelling and very appropriate for this moment where we are also much talking about ecology, the destruction of the planet. But also after COVID, it is about kind of reconvening and building, being more aware of our connections, and the communities that we build and how communities have helped us sustain through different difficult times, especially, as I mentioned, during COVID. So without much delay, so I would like you guys to tell us a little bit about the project that we are going to present today.
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much for having us, Asher, and thank you to everybody at RealMix. It's an honor to be able to present and talk to you. And we'll share our screen just so that we can show some slides and illustrate what we're doing. We just need, could you turn on the screen sharing for us? We'll do this little adjustment on our slide deck. So this is us in all our glory. I'm Jonah. So we met at New Inc., as Asher said, last year, or 2 years ago now. And before we met, we both had quite kind of elaborate practices in new media. And we'd exhibited at different locations around the world, supported by a bunch of different organizations. When we met,
And so when we met, we discovered that we both had this kind of long running parallel interests in various topics, such as clouds and landscapes, and also ecological intimacies. So we we talked a lot, and we decided to make a new work together. And we wrote a proposal. We received a grant from the Arts Council of Ireland for making a VR work. And then so we went back to Newing together in a second year as collaborators. So we've been working on this project now for about a year.
About a year, yeah. Yeah. So to introduce the kind of the concept of the work, we'll do a little experiment with the people watching. So we're gonna ask you just to notice the taste in your mouth. Consider for a moment, just maybe you can close your eyes if you like, just notice the biochemical composition of your saliva. And think about for a second all the living things, all those microscopic entities that compose your body. And think about how you as a whole entity are really porous actually and entwined with the environment around you. You are connected essentially to all the living beings and non-living things on the earth. So we want to think about this interconnection as a kind of a queer ecology. We think about our bodies extending across the earth through each other in what scholar Daisy Hilliard calls a second body. So you have yourself as you know yourself to be, but then it doesn't take a lot of imagination to realize that you also extend into this other interpenetrative mesh. Yet we still tend to create a lot of borders and hierarchies in our culture. We delineate and dominate land. We conquer landscapes, and that has catastrophic results. I don't need to tell you.
Jonah mentioned a little bit of our thinking around the ecological mesh. And so we believe that if people could understand ourselves within this kind of concept, then we could begin to access new modes of ecological care. So we've been thinking about, how to kind of create that sense of interconnectedness. And so we've been using this kind of format, the sci-fi VR narrative, to access audiences and to help audiences expand their bodily experience of the greater ecosystem. So we've been following the research in which, it's been shown that VR offers new opportunities for embodied experiences. It can allow people to generate new forms of empathy and to access more sensorial knowledge. And we think a lot also about storytelling as being a really essential tool for imagining new futures and making kin with other beings. And we've also been thinking a lot about ecological intimacy, really looking at ecology through the lens of the erotic. So we think about the erotic here in kind of Audre Lorde's sense of the term, in which the erotic is a source of power, which allows us to create change in the world.
So we're using mycelium as a metaphor for this interdependent mesh. But just to recap mycelium, what is mycelium? Everyone's heard of mushrooms, but mycelium is maybe lesser known. Mushrooms come out of the ground, but mycelium, mushrooms are the fruiting body of mycelium. Mycelium is the kind of mesh of strings of kind of white threads that you might have seen in your plant pot or your garden. It lives and disperses through all plant life. The new technologies and new research is really showing us that apart from breaking down organic material, it actually works as a communication device between many living systems across the entire earth. In fact, it's everywhere. The largest single organism that we know of on the planet is a honey fungus mycelium, which is in Oregon. So our narrative that we're creating in this VR project that we were talking about envisions mycelium as a kind of fantastical sentient entity that encircles the core of the earth, connecting us all and retaining a ledger of intimate memories.
As part of our creative research, I'm just going to give a little bit of background here. We've been using AI as a tool for imaginative processes, thinking about new images that fuse together humans and fungi, creating new hybrid bodies. We've been generating mycelium in 3D forms, and we've been playing around with different point of view possibilities in VR.
Yeah, and so right now we have an exhibition in Ireland where we've presented this first stage of this process. It's a longer project, but we're doing it in iterations. So this is an installation view of a museum exhibition in Ireland. We've also presented in GBA Gallery in Brooklyn and a few other kind of locations. So we're kind of rolling it out in parts, and we're experimenting and growing it organically in that way. So just, yeah.
So we have a few images here just of people, experiencing the VR piece in different spaces. And then we have a small walkthrough here, a 30-second little clip, just to give you a feeling of what the VR experience is like.
So this is part of what you'll see when you do the VR.
We're morning in the cypress, and I feel your sage sparrows going down on my glorious view.
Just a little taste. The voice that you heard is part of a kind of poetry project that Sue generated from AI, right?
Yeah, it's using an AI process which uses both ecological text and erotica text as a data set for training, and generates a kind of erotic ecology poetry.
Yeah. So we've also sort of taken the little beings out of the world and created these kind of video clips with them. These are created by amalgamating human forms and fungal forms in AI to generate these shapes that then we animate through a 3D process. And there's a number of those that populate the underworlds that we're creating.
And in making these pieces, we're using the kind of language of like a natural history museum, where we're collecting these kinds of specimens from that honey fungus universe, and then collecting them into these virtual boxes where they can be collected and examined. And so these were shown at the GBA Gallery as part of that show. And we have a plan for releasing these as NFTs over the next year with GBA.
Yeah, that's right. And just to mention that the text that was generated was sourced in part from the Smithsonian Botanical Research Archives and amateur erotica combined. So it has a kind of like amateur scientist vibe the whole way through. Yeah. So I don't know, Asher, I'm not able to see you for some reason. Where is it?
Can you see me? No,
no, I think I've just maybe stopped the share. There you are. Yeah.
Oh, there it was.
So yeah, I don't know. We have a lot more slides and there's a lot more things we can talk about, but I don't know.
Yeah, that was pretty nice introduction to everything. So you guys are working now on the production of NFTs of some of these objects which are inspired by the fungus and the hallucinogenous part of the mushroom. Yes.
Well, a lot of it's become like a whole constellation of works. So there's the VR experience, but then there's all the other parts that are building out from it. So even in the installation in Ireland at the moment, we have some sculptures that are taking these mycelium forms, and we intend to continue working with those. And, it's really, the ball's really rolling. It's like making more and more work. It's rhizomatic.
Yeah. Yeah, that was, for somebody like me who works a lot with artists that are working in the digital realm, it's always refreshing to see things that are more tactile. And I go to an exhibition that's, is VR, but it also has other things, that you could touch. You could, like the photographs and the NFTs that you did, which are actually framed very nicely on the walls, and the sculptures. So it is, multi-sensorial, I would say. And
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking, like, one of the things we were thinking about when we were, making the VR work was, like VR is such a kind of internal experience for the person who is in the VR space. And we were thinking, very much about like the kind of social experience of visiting art, like of being in the gallery space, of being in the museum space. And in a sense, like, it's wonderful to be in that VR space, but then there's all that social interaction, which kind of gets lost, So, we're thinking about how do we take that VR space and then we expand out of the VR space into the installation, into the gallery space to create that kind of flow of activity. So, I think that's a lot of the things we're thinking about with, creating the sculpture, enabling people to see what the person inside sees. Yeah.
And I think that's also a big part of both of our practices, that we're new media artists primarily, but we're like driven by the ideas. So we really are cross-platform in terms of, or cross-disciplinary in terms of what we make. Like we've both made sculptures and performances and videos and films and music and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, that's one of the things that caught my eye, that I thought it was interesting, was the interdisciplinarity and cross-disciplinarity of things, because that's where many unexpected magical things happen when you start mixing all these disciplines into one, instead of just going one line. And it's actually, that's the name of Hyphen Hub. Hyphen, which means the dash that unites but also separates, and it's just bringing all these people with cross-disciplinary practices. So but also your work, besides being aesthetically, beautiful and engaging, it also talks about some, data, scientific data about issues that we are connected to, like we as humans, but also, as I mentioned before, creating communities. Which is the community of the mycelium in this case, and how they fit into each other and support each other. Support like the underground network of the trees, and which is, I would say, is it's something that we as humans, we need those communities in order to thrive and survive. So I wanted to ask you about the union between human and the plant or fungus. Is that was, I know it was something that you created, but I know that also I was reading that recently scientists or something kind of declassified the fungus as a plant, and they made it into that is also part animal. Am I right?
Yeah.
It was that kind of inspiration to create this?
Yeah, it's actually closer to animal, to human. Like if you go back however many millions of years, supposedly we evolved from a form of fungus. And there was a time kind of pre-dinosaurs where there was no trees yet. The trees were small, but the world was dominated by these large towering, like 30-foot high mushroom pillars that then went underground. And so you begin to, when you look at like large tracts of time, like really way back, you begin to see how much we feed in and out of those beings. Like we're very much part of them. They're very much part of us. And we're realizing this like more and more now, I think. Yeah. I think also just in terms of the climate crisis, which is obviously a big part of this kind of project, we're realizing we're living in a time where we realize that there isn't an away anymore. There isn't you can't throw your crisp packet out because it's now on the side of the, side of a mountain, or it's washing around in the ocean. Like your shampoo bottle is like probably washing around in the North Atlantic garbage patch right now. And, so we realize that we are really connected. Even the news today was about Russia burning off a lot of the oil to essentially kind of spite Germany. But then this is going to accelerate the melting of the glaciers. So we're realizing that, even these kind of feudal fights are having like catastrophic results on biodiversity. Yeah, it's a hard thing to wrap our heads around. So in a way, the erotic gives us a new perspective on thinking about our connections to all of life.
Yeah, so, the erotics certainly has a power that drives a lot of our, our lives, and if we channel the right way, it's a major source of creativity. And is how I like experiencing your VR piece when I went to the gallery to see the show. I was taken by surprise. Also, the amount of erotic sounds that were happening when I was immersed in all that hallucinogenous world, and I was just, so I was trying to now reading more about your work, and that is a part that has been kind of continuous also interest on your area in which is the kind of the trans, the genderless and the queerness, which means you are not defined by one category or the other, but more in between. And is that so? How is scientifically, how is that related to the mushrooms? Do they have a gender? And do they? What is the erotic part to them?
Yeah. I'll speak just a little bit to the VR aspect of the sensual aspect of the VR piece. Yeah. And then I think Jonah has probably some stuff to say about mushrooms and gender. Like when we were creating the work, and of course we were talking about like the erotic as a source of power, a source of energy for creating change in the world. And it shows up in the VR piece in like several different ways. So, you see these hybrid bodies, which are combinations of human and fungi, which is a kind of like fantastical, generative or generated forms. It implies a kind of reproductive like merging between two, disparate organisms. That to generate a wholly new organism from that, it implies a kind of reproductive joining. And then when you hear the audio at the end, there's again a kind of reproductive joining there between the ecological and the erotica texts, where, the AI in a sense gives birth to this new text, which is, essentially, an erotic sentences that utilize the ecological bodies in the noun phrases. And that would be the kind of technical way of talking about it. So I think in that sense, it's thinking about how AI there can create new ideas or new images, whether those be, from text or from actual visual imagery, but new like concepts, which we may not have like thought of ourselves. And the erotic then plays that kind of role of twisting something a little bit so we can maybe see the side of it, rather than like straight on. Like if we look at ecology, if we look at climate change or climate crisis, straight on, we have a lot of information, like we receive information from science and from data, and still, even though we've had all this information for a long time, nothing has really changed the trajectory of things. So, as artists, I think, part of our job is like, how do we look at it sideways or like upside down or, turn it around and see what are the other angles, and the erotic plays a role there in helping us do that.
So so what kind of text inspire you, like to feed the AI? Because you need to feed all this information to the AI for them to compose the new text. So some of the understanding what the scientific findings about the fungi.
Yeah, well, the data set here is the ecological test is for the Smithsonian, and it takes it from, it's like the field book archives from the mid 1800s to the late 1900s, which interestingly enough is the period that just follows industrialization, right? And the start of global warming and the effects of humans. So during this time period, then scientists started to write their observations of the natural world in these field books. And so it takes that language and it merges it together with amateur written erotica. So that is just like stories written on the internet by the general public. That is just people delving into their own subconscious desires and raising those to a kind of surface level where other people can read or access them. And so, that's a kind of like interesting thing, is to take the erotic not as like a single person, but to take it as kind of a collective force, which the internet is very useful for that, because it's, interconnecting masses of communities. So we can kind of get a general kind of sense of the erotic undercurrent and then merge that together with the
mycelium is also the common knowledge in a way. It's like they all work together in synchronicity. This network has been.
I mean, there's that term, the wood wide web, that was coined. I know Merlin Sheldrake, who's a writer about mushrooms, uses it. It's this idea that information is being transferred around. Like you can technically tap into one of the threads of hyphae in a mycelium on one side of a continent, and it will tell you what the weather conditions on the other side of the continent is. So it works like a system, like an internet system in a way. I mean, it's a crude approximation because obviously it's not the internet, but it's an interesting metaphor. And so like when we're looking for ways to essentially dismantle or undercut these quite tight belief systems, things like gender, which are kind of human, we're presenting it as a kind of a human construction, like something that we've placed onto the world, then you don't really have to look very far for that sort of idea to be undone. Like you just look at the natural world and you see a kind of queer monument. It's all mixed together. It's all every mushroom is kind of having these interactions with each other that is like totally unfathomable to us. I know that there's one mushroom, Scuteenium commune or something, that has 2,800 gender identities.
Wow.
So there, and like a hyphae, a little thread will burrow through granite if it thinks that it can get to a mate. So there's almost a kind of like a romance about the way that they will try to connect to each other, but everything is happening externally to their bodies. So feeding, like everything is happening inside out. So as soon as you it's not possible for us to imagine the eroticism of mycelium, but the attempt really quickly undoes our own beliefs about ourselves.
Well, that reminds me of, I saw recently, a documentary that you suggested me to watch, but I already knew about it. It was the Fantastic Fungi. It was a very interesting documentary, and it just and it talks about the one of the specialists in mushrooms, that his family or something were very like Christian believers and something, and the father of one of them, they burned the book about the mushrooms, about the fungus, because they found all these kind of multi-gender, all these possibilities that the mushrooms could create on you, open the door to so many worlds that have been constructed very hermetically closed. This is this, and then the mushrooms represented all this openness to new things for them as Christian dogmatics seems such a scandalous thing that they burned the books.
Yeah.
So it is
it's like pagan nature, right? It's
pagan
like,
nature, yes.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Those,
Yeah.
And yeah, and I know we know that the indigenous communities, especially in the Americas and also some parts of Southeast Asia, but it's well known, like this festival is in Colombia, but so we have the Amazons and we have the Andes, all that, where many of the indigenous tribes, have been known that they are very in touch with nature for centuries, whatever. And the in deep communication, spiritual communication with them, and the mushrooms. I think in particular the psilocybin mushroom, which is the magic mushroom as we call it, that has been like one of the sources of knowledge that we make us more aware and more friendship entwined with nature, with our planet.
Okay.
And which was condemned by all the Western world, by the white Europeans, colonizers, and religion. And now scientists are finally reopening up to the benefits of these magic mushrooms for so many problems that that we have, psychiatric to physical problems.
Yeah, it's really revolutionary, and I think it's really important to think about those kind of universal insights that people seem to have on psilocybin, like the interdependent nature of all things, the idea that you are a kind of constant consciousness, that, it's almost kind of like the stoner cliches, right? But in a way, it's very beautiful and also counter to the kind of hierarchies that were colonial oppressors. You can't really acknowledge a kingdom or a racial hierarchy if you have realized that you and the trees and the plants are all one part of one living system. And if you've assimilated that knowledge in a really deep way. And I think it's also like that's the message for us in this project is that type of interdependence. And it's kind of amazing that is a universal insight that people find. And also how curative that is for people who have terminal cancer or serious depression. Like this, just understanding that connection seems to bring a huge amount of healing and kindness also.
Yes, exactly. Let's hope that we continue. We don't go backwards again with this, but it does seems, I think that the kind of work that you are doing, which is based on all these, in actual things that are also in this case backed up by scientific research, and it's so at this moment where everybody's talking about this, legalizing some of these, just to call drugs, but in a way, I'm sure we will have to change the word because drugs have such a bad connotation, and it just then to realize that these are being used for thousands of years by many groups of people, and they wouldn't have that negative connotation of that, and use these as a way, as an artistic expression to transmit all these different possibilities that is going on there, but we don't see it because our minds are so closed off to certain things.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I have a friend who's a medicinal chemist, and he describes those kind of compounds as they like putting fresh snow onto neural pathways that are entrenched. So if it's kind of basically taking the needle off the record in your brain. You have habits that you've built in, ways of seeing the world. And what the psychedelics do, the mushrooms and other things like, is that they just sort of remove the biases in those grooves so that you can make new pathways and make new connections. And I think like that's kind of both of our project independently of that is to find ways to reapproach the world, like particularly the natural world, and try to overcome this historical thought that we have dominion over land, that somehow the earth is pagan and unholy and dirty, Even in America, you know, they call Earth dirt. And so it's like this idea that we can see it in a different way, and maybe in seeing it a different way, we can access that place that's before action. So when we go to actually engage and make choices, we make them from a different place.
Yeah, and I think, you know, like if we're talking about like psilocybin or like psychedelics, then, you know, that kind of like rewiring process that Jonah's talking about here, like the rewiring of the neural pathways, the neural networks, is then it becomes a kind of like metaphor for the kind of like rewiring of like our social constructs, you know, the way that we typically think of things, you know, as a society, not just like as individual people in our own individual brains, but kind of like rewiring like how we do things, how we connect to each other and between countries, between communities, and, you know, certainly between humans and the environment, you know, surrounding environment.
Yeah, no, it is, as I said before, I think it's a very pertinent to this moment that we are going through to rewire ourselves, because it's everybody's rewiring themselves as a kind of the excuse from COVID, that we all had to stop and rethink everything. And it's it could be like a very good thing, especially like in our countries in Latin America, where we are so more in touch with nature, and it has always been part of our tradition, and somehow like is there in the layer of consciousness, more so than in other parts like the North America or Europe or whatever, where it has been so cut off from that. And is and hopefully, you know, the government, you know, there will also continue with the, you know, openness that is already kind of awakening here in the North and in Europe for these benefits. Because
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it would be an amazing tool for policy change.
Yeah,
you know, like
what we will call new explorations. You know, like when the botanics who were the Europeans who were going to South America and exploring all these very foreign exotic vegetation, they were taking notes. And now I think it's time for us to reconsider and do new types of exploration into like not only into our minds, but also the when we are looking into the connection with the ecology, with our planet. And there is this very right moment to do it as a way to re-energize, refuel our future.
And it's urgent too. I mean, it's never been so urgent. I feel like this summer, I suppose we could have said this any year, but this summer has been another example of why we need to change our relationship to nature really quickly.
Yeah. So where are you heading with this project next? Like, where would you like it to go as it grow? Or
I mean, in terms of showing it, we're going to be showing it at Virginia Tech, Moss Art Center, in the end of September, or actually, starting at the beginning of September, and we'll give a talk about it at the end of September as part of the NMC symposium. But in terms of like actually building the project,
exactly,
yes, we are going to be expanding the experience of what the audience experiences inside the score.
Yes.
So you'll notice, like in the trailer, like when you put on the score, you enter into an audio space. So our plan is to expand those particular scenes.
Yeah, you're gonna enter into like a live action scene. At the moment when you put on the score, you hear things. But the next time you do it, you're going to see things too. You're going to be in a world with, you know, a kind of a moment unfolding, let's say. And so while you're watching the moment unfolding, the mycelium will come and pull it back into the earth again. And that becomes a viewing device for like a non-linear narrative. Yeah.
Yes. And what is the interactivity, the level of interactivity with your work, or that you are planning to expand as the new technologies emerge?
Yeah.
How do we plan to expand it with new technology?
The interactivity, you know, of the
yeah. I mean, I think it's been a really interesting thing to work in VR. You know, this is our first big VR project, either of us, but also together, obviously. You know, that's the medium, is that it is your interaction. It's not, you know, with music we control what you hear, with film you control what you see, your visual art. But I feel like what we're noticing is with VR, it's controlling your engagement. And so we have had to learn and adapt to that, coming from maybe more static approaches like video or that kind of thing, and then putting people in the VR and realizing that they want to touch everything, they want to play with everything, and that's really what it does best. So we're like definitely going to incorporate that in the next iteration as the VR project. And then also, I mean, there's potential for an AR component. There's also potential for body tracking on screens that doesn't require the headset. There's also, as I said, more sculptural elements that will come. Yeah, we're really, I think, imagining it as a whole cross-platform world building experience, that it's not, that the VR is just one element in a whole world of things. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it has a lot of potential in of course the body tracking, the bio, how they call it, biotech, you know, where it reads our senses, or our fear, our excitement, and then that feeds into the experience in a way.
Yes.
Which is, so anyway, so thank you very much, guys, for being available for this conversation, and also participating in the RealMix Festival. We are, I hope you get to come to Colombia sometime.
Hope so too.
And
I hope so
really
too.
explore the all the wild exotic vegetation that we have in the mountains, and get to go to also to one of those areas where the indigenous tribes live, and you know, help expand your knowledge and practice and artistic practice to bring it to everybody else.
That'd be lovely. That'd be amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much for having us. Yes. And we're really excited to see the other projects in the festival too.
Yes. Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ashley. Bye.
Bye.